Do you know what time it is? It's supernatural story time. And if you're easily scared, and even if you're not, there's only one thing left to do. Just turn off the lights, because these are stories that you listen to only in the dark. Hi, Strangeness, Volume 2, Story Number 1. My first summer after high school, I worked for my neighbor. He had a contracting business that mainly did light remodels on houses, painting, general carpentry, basic landscaping, building decks, stuff like that. The usual crew was this guy, his partner, myself, and one or two of my friends, and a general laborer or two, depending on the size of the job. About halfway through the summer, we got a job to do some cleanup on a house a few towns over which had been neglected for a while. Repaint inside and out, fix some squeaky floors and water damage, clean up the yard, etc. It was a decent-sized house and needed a ton of work, and the estimate was that it would take about a month to do it right. The homeowners had no problem, as they were not living there and were planning on selling the place. Everything inside had already been cleared out for the most part. The first few days we spent just clearing brush and stuff out of the yards so we could get equipment in to work on the exterior. Once that was done, we split off into two crews, one scraping the outside of the house and one doing work on the inside. It was the summer and the place did not have AC, so the easier job was the work outside, and we would rotate who was in and who was out. To give you an idea of the layout of the house, when you walked in the front door, you had a large room off to your immediate right and left. Straight ahead of you and to your left, you had a staircase that went up to the second floor. To the right, a small bathroom, and then straight back to the kitchen and another large room. Upstairs, you had 4 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. There was only one staircase to the second floor. We started in the front rooms, and within an hour or so, our radio started acting up. It was an older boombox type thing, with a manual cassette player and the knob with a slide for tuning the stations. In other words, it was all mechanical, not digital. At least 3 times the station changed on its own, from 102.7, which we were listening to other random stations. Sorry, no creepy oldies music or anything. What is interesting is when it changed stations, the station it would end up would be perfectly tuned in, and the jump between stations was very quick, much quicker than a person could turn the knob and tune in the station so well, and then get away from the radio without being noticed, like seconds time. Just enough time for the slide to traverse the distance to the other station. No, the radio didn't have the mechanical stations preset. At least twice, when this happened, I was in the room, and while my back was turned to it, the radio was in a location where it would have been damn near impossible for someone to get to it, turn the station, and then get out of there. It was not by a window either. On a few occasions, the volume would go way up beyond a point that I thought this thing was capable of producing. We then moved the radio to a different room, blaming it on bad power, and the problems let up. Other strange things. Lights would go on or off while you were working, including our own portable floodlights. It wasn't the power was cut or anything, but the actual switch was thrown. You could hear heavy footsteps above you when you were sure nobody was upstairs. The final kicker, as we were wrapping up the work on the place, I was replacing some molding in a second floor bedroom. I had a large, heavy steel toolbox with a bunch of tools in it that must have weighed 30 or 40 pounds, one of those big craftsman jobs. I had just finished off most of what I was doing and had most of my stuff put away when our lunch showed up. It was raining outside, so we're all sitting in the main entranceway by the stairs. In fact, myself and another guy were sitting on the stairs. Everyone was accounted for. By this point, we were all always joking around how we were working in a haunted house due to all the strange stuff that was going on. But no one was taking it really serious. Everyone was pretty much convinced that it was a combination of an old house, our imagination, and probably a few of us screwing around with each other and causing the stuff. Mid-conversation about this, there was a giant crash from upstairs. One of the dudes freaked and just ran for the door. Myself and the dude sitting on the stairs next turned and went up the stairs. At the top of the stairs, You had a clear view of the entranceway to all of the rooms. So, in the 3 seconds it took for us to climb them, nobody would be able to get out of a room without being spotted. Inside the room I had been working, my heavy metal toolbox had been tossed across the room, its contents scattered. The time from when it happened to when I got there was so short that stuff was still rolling around. Again, this was a 30 or 40 pound toolbox, which was sitting on the floor and had been clearly tossed a good 10 feet. We checked the other rooms and of course found nothing. To go out the window, which was closed as it was raining, would have been a 15-foot drop into some nasty bushes. No ladders were up on the house, or even off the truck for that matter that day, due to the rain. Everyone working there was sitting with us while we ate, and nobody could have gotten past us and down the stairs while we checked the rooms, as there were people watching the stairs. It was pretty damn scary, and the final couple of days of us working there, everyone was really on edge. Nobody would go into the room alone, and you could tell everyone was pretty much scared shitless. The boss mentioned the goings-on to the homeowner, who was just kind of like, whatever. A few years later, the place burned to the ground, and one of the guys I worked with that summer, who now lived in the town, sent me a story from the local paper. Turns out that the previous owner, who lived there, was a shut-in type person after his wife died a decade or so prior. Didn't ever really come out much, do much, which explained the neglect. He had died about a year prior to us working on the house, but nobody found his body for at least 6 months. The people who had hired us were his estranged son's family, who had inherited the house and were trying to sell it. The house had changed hands a couple of times in the several years after we worked on it. Nobody ever stayed very long, and it was growing a haunted legend in the town. In the interest of brevity, I left out some of the smaller parts of the story that were strange, or could have been explained the way easier. But suffice to say, some weird stuff was going on while we were there. I'm not one that really believes in ghosts or anything, but I have no way of explaining some of the stuff that happened there in any rational way. Thinking about it still gives me the chills. Nobody was aware of the story behind the house when we were working there, and you could tell after the toolbox incident, everyone was truly on edge. Story number 2. Mine is a story that I can hardly tell. It's a true twist of fate. To start from the beginning would take some time. It's so strange, but yet all true. This is not a lie or a made-up tale. All facts can be proven. I grew up in North Terre Haute. As a young man, I would go to a local store that served lunches to school kids. The name of the store was Stapleton's. It was located behind a gas station and across from a local tavern named Jiggs. The old man that owned the store was a scary-looking fellow with a hardened face and a flat-top haircut. He had a raspy voice and a no-nonsense personality. I always felt that he was harmless, but there was something about him that always made my gut feeling stir. He and his wife lived near my home and was near a gas station that we would always ride our bikes to. It was one of the nicest homes in the area. I can remember stopping in front of the home to just stare in wonderment of what was in there. I never saw anyone at or around the house, just lights at night, dimly lit. As time went by, and I became a teen and in high school, it was Thanksgiving morning 1978 or 79, I believe I watched Mr. Stapleton die. My father and I were on our way to the IGA for my mother and were among the first to arrive at a horrible auto accident. A kid that I went to school with and later I worked with him for a few years had a Buick Wildcat that had dual exhaust. He would drop that car into low and nail it to hear the pipes roar. I rode in that car a few times. That morning, Mr. Stapleton was visiting his brother's business and was pulling out onto Highway 41 at the same time a car was turning another direction. My friend from school passed the car on the wrong side and T-boned Mr. Stapleton's car. Witnesses said that he dropped the car into low and nailed it when he hit Mr. Stapleton, killing him. Years went by, and I watched the house go downhill and eventually forgot about it altogether. I married, and shortly after the birth of my second child, I bought a home near my parents and remodeled it. We were all happy and content until one day I drove by the Stapleton home and saw that they were getting ready for an estate sale. The day of the sale, I went with my youngest daughter to buy a rocking chair that was listed. After looking at the house, I went inside to look around. I was amazed that the home was well built in the 1960s. I had a few strange feelings, but dismissed them. Like a sixth sense came over me for a short time. I got really into the home and the possibilities that it had. With nothing more than barely 20% down, I bought the house. I was shocked, and so was my wife. I had no idea how this home would change our lives. I started the day tearing out the old and making a new home. I totally gutted most of the house and modernized the home. It was big and beautiful. Little did I know that the strange happenings of the home would haunt me and stay with me to this very day. It started when I stripped the basement and walked out of the attached two-car garage. I would work very late and sometimes stay home alone in the house, wake up and work some more. I had a deadline with the bank, and my love for the house drove me on. One night my father and I were working in the basement, and I had cut a nudge hole in the living room floor to place a stairwell to the new basement family room. We heard someone open the back door and walk across the floor to approximately where we were, but above us. I yelled out down here without reply. I went up a ladder and saw no one. We were puzzled and laughed it off. The next few nights was filled with strange happenings. I would encounter moving cold spots and would follow them in and out of rooms. It was probably just drafts from a big old house. The spots would chill you to the bone. One night on a hot summer evening, I was working and my dog Sam, a German Shepherd, was very nervous acting. She would jump up and bark and growl at something. I thought nothing of it until I heard a big bang noise coming from the master bedroom. I investigated the problem and found that the bathroom door slammed shut. Sam was barking at the door, and I thought, wow, this is a drafty old house. There were logical explanations for the happenings. I thought nothing of it. I'm a very logical, open-minded person. I would later come to realize that a power unseen was at hand. I never believed, but now I am very sensitive to spirits and strange happenings. I learned over time not to listen with my ears, but my inner feeling. First impression sort of thing. While working on the house, I would hear strange noises and unexplained silly things to me. The master bath door slammed from time to time and got stuck at one point, jammed shut. I removed the door and trimmed the uneven portion from the bottom and rehung it. That lasted for a while. I finished the home and moved my family in and started to enjoy the home and its fireplace and open space. It was then that we all experienced strange things. I woke to my wife yelling at me about the new cabinet kitchen that I had installed. It seemed that someone opened all the doors during the night. Over the next few months, this happened several times. I took the blame as a prank, not wanting to scare my wife and kids. I put every dime I had into this home. I could not leave. It got to be such a joke that we would hear someone come in the back door while we were downstairs and walk across the floor. Every time the same thing. Not a soul in sight. It was all so real. One night, my two daughters were sleeping and I awoke to creaking noises in the hallway. I then heard someone walking down the hallway and grabbed my youngest daughter's doorknob and twisted it several times. I yelled at my oldest, who was handicapped, to get back to bed. She would often night walk in total darkness. She did not have the ability to fear darkness. I got up to investigate. My oldest daughter was sleeping soundly, and my youngest had a small dog that was at this time barking. I looked in on her, and she told me to stop making the dog bark. I stood in the hall freezing and thinking, this is real. The next morning she told me that turning her doorknob and making the dog bark was not funny. I laughed and played it off as my fault. Soon after that, Sam stayed in the garage just under our bedroom. She would bark so aggressively that I would have to get up and scold her. Then I discovered that every time she barked, the basement window was wide open. My wife and I both experienced this. Over and over again, the dog would bark and the window would be open. I bent the latch on the window so it could not be opened. This was fine for a couple of weeks. And then one night, Sam barked and the next morning the window was open. This really got our attention. It was soon after that many unexplained things happened. Glasses flying out of the kitchen cabinets in the middle of the night, door slamming in the bathroom door. I removed it and trimmed it 5 times, one time leaving a 1-inch gap to stop it from sticking. It was unbelievable. The door was level and plumb. One evening, we were in the family room downstairs and heard someone enter the house via the back door and glass break. I jumped and ran upstairs to find a vase on the fireplace mantel was broken on the floor. The door was locked. I was mad. I yelled, "We're a family and we live here now. We are good people. Leave us alone." Things were quiet for a while, and nothing remarkable happened until a cold January night. We had been in the country all day playing in the snow on quad runners and arrived back home in the early evening. I backed my truck in the drive and opened the garage to let Sam out. She greeted me. It made me scratch her head and was so happy to see me. She would not leave my side. She acted strange to me. Again, that feeling happened, but I dismissed it. I left Sam at the entrance to the garage and told her to do her duty. I got into my truck and looked in the mirror and saw Sam just fold up and fall on her face. She dropped dead. I picked her up and took her inside, built a fire in the family room fireplace, and me and my wife and kids held Sam and cried. As I went to put the quads away, the basement window was open. Sam had clawed and chewed at something. Marks on the wall from her efforts painted a picture as clear as could be. That feeling made my blood run cold. I will never forget it. In the weeks after Sam died, everything calmed down. No feelings, no unexplained noises. Everything went well until one March evening. It's something that I will never get over as long as I live. My wife and I had been fighting. Our marriage was coming to an end, and we were trying to get back on track by going to Saturday evening mass. We were all standing at the door in the family room, getting ready to walk out. There was a laundry room between the family room and the garage. I started to open the door to the laundry room, with the family right behind me, and something was pushing the door from the backside. I was fighting to force back and forth until it slammed on me. I got mad and burst the door open with force. Nobody or nothing was in the way. My wife and kids witnessed this. It was truly the last straw for me. At this point, I was very frightened and mad. The house tore us apart. It changed me and us forever. I moved out shortly after while divorcing. My youngest daughter moved to the basement family room with her girlfriend. She stated that clocks would not keep time and the TV would turn on by itself. I had seen this happen too. She and her girlfriend saw a lamp fly across the room and hit the wall above the bed. They moved upstairs that night. Many strange things happened while I was living there. I tried to explain them and convince myself that it was nothing. I was wrong. The whole experience did something to me that will forever be with me. I dream of my experiences from time to time. I left something unfinished there. I just can't put my finger on what. I stop short each time I get close to it. It still haunts me to this day. That's what made me confess this. Maybe somebody would think of what I overlooked. The house was sold shortly after we divorced. It sold in 3 days. I wonder if the new occupants have any strange happenings. There's so much more to tell. I wish I could write it down. But I fear that nobody will believe me and mock us for what we felt was a ghost. The home is located in North Terre Haute, Indiana on Crystal Avenue. I want to go back and talk to the new residents, but I fear that I may open a chapter that I can't finish since I no longer live there. I can truly say I saw figures at times, or someone or something, or maybe just shadows from the corner of my eye. Nevertheless, the feeling I got was the presence of a ghost. Next story. I'm not really sure about where to begin this story. There really is no climax, just some strange experiences. My best friend and I had just moved to our new 2-bedroom apartment that we were sharing. I guess we were there for a couple of weeks when strange things started to happen. The first thing I remember is my computer always turning itself off. It was not just a shutdown, because everything would be off. The speakers, the printer, everything. I wrote this off and thought maybe it was electrical problems, but then nothing else in the house would change. For example, the clocks were not reset. Since the day we moved in, we both noticed a strange feeling in the place, kind of like a heavy, restless feeling. But I did my best not to connect these two ideas in any way, and decided it was just a new place, a new town. A couple of weeks after that, things started to get more strange. My bedroom door would slam for no apparent reason. We tried turning the fans off, closing windows, turning off the central air. Anything we thought might be contributing to this, but nothing helped. What made this even more strange is that we had a very thick plush carpet that met the bottom of the door, which would make it difficult for even a strong draft to slam the door. This continued, but we would only hear it, never see it. That changed one night when I was in my bedroom getting ready to take a bath. I had just run the bath water and went back into the room. The room and bathroom were connected, to grab my robe. For some reason, as I was digging through the pile of clean clothes looking for my robe, I felt compelled to look at the bathroom door. Just as I did, it slammed shut right in my face. I decided against my bath that night and opted to sleep in my friend's room with her. She was more calm about the situation, but it was beginning to take a toll on me, and it seemed it all happened in my room. That night, we were sitting on her bed, talking about all of this, and from where I was sitting, my bedroom door was in plain view. We were talking, and it was odd, but it was like I knew my bedroom door was going to slam. I kept watching from the corner of my eye, but nothing happened. I decided to shake the feeling off and focus more on the conversation. As soon as I looked back at my friend, the door slammed louder than it ever had. I was through. I freaked out and was stern in my conviction not to go back in there anytime soon. I stayed in my friend's room for a few days, and that is when it started in the kitchen. We were sitting in her room watching TV one night, and I heard water running. I heard it, but I paid no attention. We lived in a complex with over 250 units, and with someone living above, below, and on 3 sides, you tend to hear everything. After a while, though, I realized that the sound was close, like it was coming from our apartment. I went into the hallway, and I could see into the kitchen. The faucet in the kitchen sink was on full blast. We racked our minds for the next 20 minutes to make sure neither of us had left it on. Neither of us had used the sink. A few nights later, we were getting ready to leave the house, and as we were walking to the front door, I noticed my friend looking strangely towards the kitchen. Reluctantly, I turned to see what it was, and what I saw was the cabinet where we kept the cups. It was open and totally empty. Not one cup in there. We just looked at each other, kind of crazy, and left. Later that night, we came home, and I walked into my room to get something. As soon as I opened the door, staring me in my face were the kitchen cups, all over my bedroom floor. As can be assumed, my reaction was not a calm one. At this point, my friend was scared as well. Until now, she kept calm and insisted that we ignore it, etc. Not anymore. We ended up moving out a few weeks later because of a job transfer we both received, but I can't say that I wasn't happy to go. Next story. Back in 2006, I went on a holiday for a week with my boyfriend and my parents to Fuerteventura, one of the Canary Islands. We rented a private villa, and when we arrived, I immediately did not like the room that I and my boyfriend were sharing. I got a very peculiar feeling that I had never experienced before. It was not a bad or frightened feeling, just an odd, uncomfortable sensation. When we arrived, we sat down in the kitchen for a cup of coffee. I remember sitting at the table and just glaring constantly into our room, almost daring someone or something to walk past the door. It was odd because, at the time, I didn't know why I felt so uncomfortable there, as I had never previously experienced anything supernatural whatsoever. I just knew something wasn't right. Throughout the holiday, I woke continuously throughout the night, sometimes 4 or 5 times, with a feeling that someone else was in the room. I never had a decent night's sleep. One night I woke up right at the edge of the bed with the same familiar feeling of a third person in the room. The little bedside table next to our bed was gently thudding against the wall. I watched it for a few seconds, wondering what could be causing it, and I even shuffled right away from the side of the bed just in case there was any slight chance I was doing it myself. However, as I half expected, the table carried on thudding against the wall. It wasn't violent, just a gentle thud, and I did not get a frightened feeling at the time. To be honest, I was that tired I thought nothing of it and fell back to sleep. The next morning, when I woke up, I had again the feelings of something not being right in our room, and it was confirmed. But for some reason, I didn't tell my boyfriend or my parents anything about it. After all, Who has heard of a haunted modern Spanish villa? On the second night, I woke up a lot more than usual because my back had got burnt that day and I was sore, so I kept a bottle of after sun cream on the bedside table so I could keep reapplying it throughout the night. One of the times that I woke up, I put some after sun on my hand and leaned forward in the bed to rub it in my back. It just so happened to glance in the big long mirror we had on the wall alongside the bed, and I saw something very peculiar. Even though it was dark in the room, I saw very clearly a tall, thin man, and he was coming towards the mirror. He was quite a long distance away, as if he was reflected from the bathroom coming into the bedroom. He was wearing black, but he had a long white frilly thing running down its middle, as if he was wearing a white frilly shirt and a black jacket, a bit like a dinner suit. His hair was strange. It was cut just above the shoulder length, but was curled up around the bottom in a kind of bob, and it was ginger. This all happened in a matter of seconds. I turned around to look around the room, but it was dark and appeared empty. I woke up my boyfriend to ask him for the time, and he said it was 6:30 a.m. I asked him what time it would start getting lighter, and he said he didn't know, so I turned on the light and eventually drifted back to sleep. Later that morning, I felt I had to mention all of this to my boyfriend and my parents, and I told them everything that had happened. That night was the last night, and I kept the light on, but I couldn't get to sleep. I wasn't scared to be in there, but I didn't particularly want to see him again, and I was scared to open and close my eyes. It sounds daft, but as it was my last night there, I was a bit worried he might do something to wind me up. So in the end, we took all the bedclothes into the living room and slept on the sofas. Nothing happened that night, and although I was on my guard a lot and woke up several times, I felt relieved to be out of the bedroom. We came home, and after a few weeks, my boyfriend admitted that he had also had an experience. He said that one night, when we were asleep, he suddenly had a mini 4-second dream of a shadow of a man in our bathroom, crossing the room to close the shower door, and then he woke up. He said he didn't want to tell me when we were on holiday in case it made things worse. By that, I think he meant making my complaints of a man with ginger hair in our bedroom worse. I emailed the company we rented the villa from to ask if any other guests had reported anything unusual in the villa, and of course, I never got a reply. Next story. This whole experience seemed 100% real as it was happening in my mind. I assume it must have been a dream, but it was by far and away the most realistic dream or nightmare I have ever encountered. What I thought was me awakening from a deep sleep with troubled breathing, as though something had its hands wrapped around my neck. I opened my eyes to see this person who was under my covers, sitting knees first down on top of my chest, choking my throat with their knees, holding my arms down. I couldn't see a face straight away. I tried screaming for help from my wife, who was working on the computer in the adjoining room, but was unable to mutter much more than a faint murmur due to the being's hand wrapped around my throat. After several minutes of trying to fight this being off my body, I finally got a hand free to knock on the wall to attract my wife to come for help, where I was able to somewhat fight this being off my body until my wife came in, and I was then able to see this being's face for the first time. I looked and saw a blonde female's face who had been drowned. My wife finally helped me get this being off me, and as I got up to hug her and turned around, the being was gone. I got my wife to come to bed with me, and we held each other close and finally slowly dozed off again. I realized that this being was back and that it was not my wife. I felt a surge of pressure being applied to my body by this being as it once again tried to sit down on top of my chest. While I was fighting this being, I assumed I passed out. What seemed to be about 5 minutes later, I physically woke up. For real, this time. Threw my covers off, turned on the light, and headed straight for my wife in the next room. I told her about my experience, and she could see I was quite shaken up about it. I asked her about things like, did she hear me scream? Did she come in to help me? To which she didn't. All I could put this down to was a dream. But I've read similar stories and wondered if it could be more of a sleep paralysis syndrome. I take antihistamines, but have done so for over 10 years, with no previous occurrence of this at all. I have what I believe was contact with a paranormal being before, although other times It was when I was well and truly awake, and now it makes me wonder if this was a ghost, a dream, or something much worse. Next story. This all happened in the summer in August here in Cardiff, UK. At about 7 p.m., my friend and I decided to go into the woods at Heath Park, as we were very bored that day, and I believe it was one of the hottest days on record for the UK, so we were very hot and bothered. We trekked into the woods until we came to a huge tree. We sat by the tree for nearly an hour cooling down. It was also next to a large pond. At about 9 p.m., we realized that it was very nearly dark, so we decided to make our way back home. We had about a 15-minute walk to get back out of the woods, and nothing strange had happened until I noticed a figure about 200 yards away from us, back from where we had just come from. I thought this was strange, but thought nothing more of it. About 4 or 5 minutes later, I looked back and saw the figure again, but this time it was closer. I thought this was strange, as there were no people close to us when we were at the tree, so I decided to tell my friend. Josh thought I was messing around with him and did not believe me at all. This was much to my frustration. About 3 or 4 minutes later again, I looked to the side and the figure was about 50 yards away, only it was amongst all nettles and bushes. I was really scared at this point, as we weren't even halfway through the journey and it was very nearly dark. I told Josh to keep looking around and to speed up our walking pace. A few minutes later, Josh saw the figure on the other side of us, and we were both really scared, so we ran. When we got into the open field, which would lead us to a road, we ran about halfway into it and looked back, and we both saw the figure standing on the edge of the woods. We ran all the way home. The figure that we saw was very weird, because every time I saw it, it was perfectly still. We could not make out the face or gender of this thing. It was just in what looked like a blue cloak. I've been back to the spot a few times since that day, and nothing strange has happened. But me or Josh will not go back there at dusk again, just in case.